Good afternoon. Yeah, nice. My name is Carl.
And I'm Matt Palmer.
And we're here to help you introduce some UX to your GIS organization. Sound good? If anybody's in the wrong room, and we've had this up for a while, you haven't noticed, but this is the topic today. Yeah, all right. Let's talk about what we're going to go through today. So we're going to start really simple and look for some definitions. And then we're going to walk through some topics here that may be some good insight around how to actually bring up these conversations in your organization. Advocacy, brainstorming, organization and alignment, actually gathering feedback, data gathering, and then finally some design. These are the main tenets that we're going to hit today. I'm going to close with a Q&A. If that's all right with everybody, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off.
All right.
Yeah.
So before we get started, just wanted to show that we're the first of many UX workshops that are going through this week. So we're going to kind of do an overview of just really broad strokes of UX and how you can introduce it to your org. But as you can see here, there's some deep dives and really great workshops that I recommend you guys going to. So I just wanted to advertise that up front. So what is UX? This sounds like an opening question that I want to just kind of hear from you guys as far as if anybody has like a kind of off-the-cuff answer for what UX is. You won't be wrong. Yes?
The full experience front to back.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, that's a great spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So the full experience, front to back for a user, definition of UX. It's great.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I think it makes the difference between whether people use your stuff or whether they go out of their way.
Nice. Yeah. Different way to look at it, right? The difference
Right.
between people using your stuff and not, potentially, right? Yeah. There's a lot of different ways that this can roll out.
Right.
So we thought we would ask a professional. People might be familiar with this gentleman here named Donald Norman. So there was we'll just play the video and let good old Don speak for himself. Does anybody not know Donald? Donald Norman is pretty well known in the UX community, usability community. He's part of the Nielsen-Norman group. Jakob Nielsen and Donald Norman being the Nielsen and Norman of that group. So it's been around for a long time. Original author of Design of Everyday Things. Maybe a familiar book to some people. Let's listen to Don's explanation here. Got this video all booted up.
Hi, I'm Angie Lee, and I'm here at the UX conference in San Francisco. I got to ask Don Norman what he thinks about the term UX.
Once upon a time, a very long time ago, I was at Apple. And we said the experience of using these computers is weak. The experience, when you first discover it, when you see it in the store, when you buy it, when you can't fit it into the car, it's in this great big box, it doesn't fit into the car, and when you finally do get it home, you're opening the box up, and it looks scary, I don't know if I dare put this computer together. All of that is user experience. It's everything that touches upon your experience with the product, and it may not even be near the product, it may be when you're telling somebody else about it. That's what we meant when we devised the term user experience and set up what we called the User Experience Architect's Office at Apple to try to enhance things. Now, Apple was already pretty good, so we were starting with a good product, making it even better. Today, that term has been horribly misused. It's used by people to say, I'm a user experience designer, I design websites, or I design apps, and they have no clues to what they're doing, and they think the experience is that simple device, the website, or the app, or who knows what. No, it's everything. It's the way you experience the world, it's the way you experience your life, it's the way you experience the service. Or, an app, or a computer system, but it's a system, it's everything. Got it?
The way you experience life, right? So I think that end-to-end comment, but also whether people are going to buy your product or not. Of course. So we're looking at this definition as being pretty central to what we speak to today. That user experience is more than design of a website or an app, right? That there's a user there and there's an experience involved. I know it sounds obvious, but those are the things that are pretty easy to forget, right? Let's get back to the presentation.
Yep. Go ahead.
So it's pretty key to the presentation. So in addition to Don plus UX, we really wanted you guys to remember what we were talking about and who said this. So we thought we might introduce a couple extra Dons into the atmosphere here. Just to get Don and UX in your mind. If this isn't triggering, maybe we can put this up.
Right.
Is that helping for anybody? So Don plus UX, it's a thing.
You'll search that later in Google, and Don Norman will come up. So that'll help you.
Just remember Don, not Donatello. That's the wrong one. So speaking of maturity, let's talk about the design maturity of your organization. So let's focus on that concept here. So how would you guys describe currently your design maturity in your organization using maybe something like this? So this is a really kind of text-heavy example, but what's important, and you can find a lot of versions of this design maturity, what's important is that you look at something like at the bottom at level X, the need for a user-centered design process is not even recognized. While at the other end of the spectrum, up at the top, at institutionalized level, it's fully integrated, where UX defects are on par with system-level defects. So where are we at in this room? Just a quick show of hands. Who thinks they're at level X right now in your organization? Don't look around and shame people after this. Yeah, there's definitely hands up. This is a thing. We live in a world where it is not part of your organization. Is anybody here that happens to be at the institutionalized level? Like, you guys are killing this. Because we have a few questions for you guys.
Yeah.
Right. So here we are talking about design maturity, and at the point of this is approaching the concept of advocacy within your organization. The way to take that first step up that maturity staircase that we just looked at is to start becoming an advocate of your users. And again, it's pretty obvious, the user experience part. Let's unpack what that means. So the user really is the fundamental perspective in good UX, keeping that user in the UX really prominent. So by building something that mechanically works, like at the bottom level, it might be secure and functional. You could build something, right? That's just the first step, though. It doesn't mean that people are going to use it, that it's useful, or that people will enjoy using it, right? So by targeting users, their behaviors, the context around their use of your product, we start getting things to be a little easier to use. And then, ideally, fun and or personal. To deliver value and understanding. Everyone here can likely reflect on times where software has seemed like it's doing the thinking for you, where you're like, oh yeah, that's what I was looking for, right? So practicing empathy when developing a product is the habit of separating your needs from user needs. And that feeling that we were just talking about, that software has been designed with users in mind, is the evidence of empathy being in play here. Empathy for user behaviors and expectations. So focus on centering your design and implementation around the user instead of technology or feature or requirement. Consider accessibility and 508 compliance standards. Designing like you develop according only to features, only to requirements, is not going to get you to your target. People are going to be frustrated, perhaps, and at the very worst, not use your product. So fortunately, our colleague Tao, let me throw this in there, will be actually leading a workshop on Thursday morning addressing more about accessibility. So if you are keen on the accessibility topic, please return and listen to Tao. So to get started focusing on user empathy, it's helpful to conduct exercises like the one that's kind of outlined here. This is really simple and fun, where you can actually make lists that detail user experiences. What your users are saying, thinking, doing, and feeling. by actually generating conceptual lists around what you believe your primary audience is, their behaviors and their expectations, is that first step where you're actually getting in the driver's seat with your user. You're getting behind those behaviors and expectations and putting on your user's hat, to use a term, instead of your own. So this kind of empathy map here, doing this kind of activity, is really building up a user proxy, trying to understand your user without them being in the space that you are designing or implementing. And those are generally called personas. People are probably familiar with the concept of a persona. The personas typically convey target user demographics, goals, pain points, and related scenarios. They really do get behind the piece of empathy. Representative personas are very empathetic. They guide decisions, improve efficiency, resolve conflicts, and help to pinpoint solutions. Not just one solution, but maybe potentially many solutions. Personas, however, simply represent people. And people tend to wear a lot of hats in the workplace. Scenarios further your understanding of target users by placing them in tasks and workflows, right? So scenarios drive better understanding about users because if you focus only on those features, you're thinking about technology, not about users. If you focus on scenarios, you are thinking about users, user goals, and expectations. Effective scenarios are solution agnostic, not pointed at one solution, but leave it open-ended so that you can determine that correct right-sized solution yourself. To validate proposed features. Is that the right solution? Perhaps. So here's an example of a really detailed persona, which is the who, and how it relates to the overall scenario, or what, pointing at a goal, or why. So these things kind of fold into each other. You're having empathy for your user enough to be able to generate a persona, play that persona through any number of predictable scenarios that are related to your product, software, and reach that goal of defining what they want. You can have a solution now. You've defined the goal. Let's start building, right? Or at least let's start putting together ideas around that build. So let's practice some empathy. Yeah, sound good?
Yep.
This is a really quick activity that we like to do. But let's consider this. So first of all, we're going to actually force you to speak to another person. Maybe they're sitting next to you. So find a person. And just for the next minute or so, each, why don't you guys discuss with each other what features of your home you enjoy the most or is most important to you? How would you redesign or improve it if you could? Let's just take a minute to do this. Hey, Matt. How's it going?
Hey, good. Let's turn off my microphone. It's going to get louder.
So when I do my part, we'll just hand this back and forth so I can advance the slides.
I'm going to give this to you.
Yeah.
I'm almost done with. I didn't go through any of your stuff today.
No.
Man, it's funny how you just kind of play.
Once we hand off, we'll just do that.
I think this is decent pace,
Yeah.
though we'll wrap and then get going, right? I'll know that my next session. Okay, that's enough time. Now switch.
Think you got it? Okay. All right.
I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to let you wrap.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up. All right. Everybody got their feature they want?
Hello?
Hello, everybody?
Hello?
Okay. So that was awesome. Sounded like some passionate folks out there getting some features communicated. Cool. So that's good. So here comes the fun part of this, and the empathy is find another pair. So person you just told your feature to, find another pair and describe the feature that you heard from the other person to someone else.
So what you're not doing is repeating what you heard.
Right.
What you are doing is interpreting that, practicing empathy,
Yeah.
and describing to these people what you think is important about life to this person, right? Generalizing it. Right?
Yes, exactly. So go ahead, take another minute or two. Find another pair.
Hello?
Hello, hello?
That works. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hi.
So just maybe a couple, how did that go? How did you guys feel about that? Pretty good? Easy?
That
Did
feel
you
good?
Do you remember features, or were they kind of like a telephone game? You kind of heard something else and translated it. Yeah?
I didn't
Cool.
say that.
So that's a really quick, easy activity you can do with anybody in your organization. They get it. It gets that empathy across. You have to hear something, translate it into terms that make sense for someone else to comprehend it. And so, yeah, really, really easy one. So there's a couple other activities that you can do in your organization that help at a level to give empathy and to start to build a little bit of that user experience thinking within your organization. And one of them is brainstorming. So brainstorming is something that everybody understands at some level, understands what goes on there. It can take many different shapes and forms, tons of Post-it notes, maybe not, just sharing ideas. But there's one thing to really keep in mind when you're doing a brainstorm, and the true objective of it is just to provide a safe place that everybody can share and surface new ideas and approaches to a problem, right? If it's not safe, you're not going to get those crazy ideas that help solve a problem, right? So making sure it's safe. And then another thing doing brainstorming is kind of thinking about who in your organization can be in this brainstorm, right? So you might kind of go towards a safe place or people that you work with a lot, or you might go towards someone else in your organization like customer service. They hear a lot of calls, they hear a lot about different problems, so great perspective to have in brainstorm. Sales, they've probably heard a few things and want to probably be a part of a brainstorm, right? Marketing, they have those personas, they have those market trends, audiences in mind, so another good group to bring into a brainstorm. Obviously product management, so there's someone that's a little closer to what your problems you're trying to solve, but also someone to invite. And then other designers and developers, so your colleagues, people that can kind of help it along to get to an objective pretty quickly. So a little bit of homework down here is kind of in your mind right now, you're thinking of people that you might want to invite to a brainstorm. They're probably some of those safe people that are easy to get ideas that you really collaborate well with. But the second part of this is the hard part. So list members that you're reluctant to invite maybe, that you want to build bridges and collaborate with, because that's going to start to build that culture within your organization to start to invite more people to brainstorms and these kind of activities to solve problems. So some benefits for brainstorming, really a top level one is just a culture of creative thinking ideation, right? So the more people involved, more people feel like they have buy-in to solving a solution, the more you're going to have that across your organization. Introduces your organization to elevating a format that elevates problem solving, so it's easy to do anywhere, anytime. And then, like I said before in that slide previously, is it pulls together people from all over the organization. You don't have to be a designer. You don't have to be know the best practices for development. You can pull in anybody to this. And lastly, this is really what you're after, right, is to produce these game-changing ideas. And so having that safe place and having everybody involved, you start to elevate these things that really can change your product and also just change the whole space of the industry. Is the potential here. So one of those deep dive workshops, Mitch and Alex are going to be presenting on Thursday. So be sure to go to that if you're looking for how to brainstorm. And it's going to be more workshop format, so you're going to get some really hands-on techniques and things. So with that, Carl, organization alignment. Oh, it's me? Okay.
I don't feel like it.
Fine, I'll do it. Okay. So how do you organize concepts and reach consensus among stakeholders? So this is a tough one, right? Like how do you get that alignment so that you actually go towards something? It's not just coming from your product owner, it's coming from maybe a stakeholder, a business owner, that kind of thing. And so another part of this is trying to actually collaborate with stakeholders. And one way to do that is with these milestones and different points in the user journey that you're all trying to have the user go through and make that part of their journey. And some of that is business and some of that's user-based. And so journey mapping is one of those things that really helps to bring those two together in a meaningful way that everybody can align to. And so it starts with personas, as Carl already mentioned, and trying to figure out who that persona is for this one user journey. So for here, it's current Esri customer for us is one of the archetypes. Get the tasks, different things they want to do. But then you bring this into this kind of really chaotic looking diagram that you see here. And so what this is a user journey map that we've used. And so there's a few different ways you can align here. One is just the categories, so the different stages that the person's going through. So if it's anywhere from discovery all the way through to being an evangelist for your product, you can actually identify what the user's doing through each one of these. And then this is a little bit expanded because it has the questions and takeaways, and then also just maybe some key content or some key pieces of information that you want to have in that stage through the journey. And so, as I have at the top there, this is great to do with just a current. Take your analytics, take those different milestones that you have currently and run it through this, and then look at that with your stakeholders and really kind of agree on what the current status of the user journey is. But then it's also good to just redo it into what you want to actually go through and have happen in the future state of your product. And so this is not just digital. This is something you can do on a nice whiteboard like this. It's very collaborative. It is dedicated to this whiteboard, so anybody can walk by, they can look at this thing, and they can know exactly what work you're doing, and they can comment on it, which is great for trying to align this in your organization as these visible artifacts like this that someone can look at and say, oh, wow, this is what they're doing. There's some user experience going on, and they're actually considering what this persona is going to do through all these stages. So other couple activities are card sorts, really easy for people to pick up on how to do and start to agree on categories of content. And then affinity diagrams, just really bringing in all sorts of ideas and trying to group them into ways that everybody agrees on. So with that, Carl's going to talk about gathering feedback.
Yeah, cool. All right, so is that? All right, so now we've become an advocate. We've admitted that there's users, and we've spent time thinking about them. We've conducted some brainstorming activities where we're just going to let ideation happen and flourish, right? We've organized and aligned within our organization around a perspective through a couple different techniques that Matt brought up. So now you're ready to actually engage, let's say, some users or stakeholders. So what are the primary methods that you could do that? Or anyone in your organization could do that? Hint, none of these are going to surprise you. The most lightweight method to gather information from a large group of people is to put together a survey or a poll. These take the least time to set up and provide fast results. What's nice about them is that they're digital. You can create them easily and reuse them. They can be remote and asynchronous. You don't have to be there when people are filling these out. And specifically want to use these when you're looking to quickly gather multiple perspectives. So you want a lot of opinions about a thing or a set of things, right? There's a couple different types, qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative surveys are about comments and feedback and suggestions. This is largely the essay type, long response or short response answer, where you're going to actually have to sift through these responses to pull out that meaning. Quantitative are a little bit easier, right? They're the yeses or nos. They're the things that the participant can march through without having to actually write, to select an answer, right? So a couple different ways to build these, but the point being is that they're fast and easy, generally. There's many services like Survey Gizmo or SurveyMonkey that you can jump in and make this process rather swift and painless. So surveys and polls. Really fun, quick, easy way to gather information. So let's say you've gathered a bunch of information and you want to take a deep dive into a couple of those perspectives. Interviews should be no shock to you, right? Sitting down with a user or a stakeholder, really taking that deep dive, right? So you don't have the amount of response that that you get from a survey or a poll, but you get the depth and the understanding around that topic in an interview. So what's nice about these is that they can be digital and or live action. They can be remote or on-site, typically at the same time though. You can't really get around that synchronicity. And used when people are looking to identify specific information from specific individuals. So maybe that survey identified the people that you want to talk to or the topics that you want to focus on. There's a lot of different note-taking types in interviews. It's not super tricky. They can be descriptive, meaning that they observe the user doing or saying something, and you just write it down, which is what they're doing. They can be inferential, right? So build an inferred story by using inference to describe observation. The participant appeared frustrated. The participant appeared excited about topics, right? Evaluative, make judgments from inferences and behaviors. For example, many zoo animals did not have a positive experience in captivity. Somebody's telling a story about it, you make an evaluation of what they said, right? That's the empathy part, cluing into what the user's trying to talk about. So surveys and interviews. Finally, when you have something together, you have some kind of understanding of, here's what we want to talk about, here's the users that we want to speak to. We've interviewed a few users, we've really gathered a lot of information about this thing. Positive, negative, challenging, successful. One way to really put a lot of those assumptions to some kind of a test is to actually test your material, your design or your prototype. Right? This doesn't have to be a high fidelity usability test. It could be absolutely low fidelity. You could bust out some paper. You could do this on a chalkboard if you wanted to. It all depends on how many resources you have available to put this experience together. Again, typically digital, meaning that you can reuse this content for multiple tests. Again, they can be remote or on-site, typically synchronous. And used when you're looking to evaluate a design, right? Through the lens of specific perspectives that you might have identified in your survey. Again, there's a couple types of usability evaluations, and it's really about when you launch the evaluation. Is it formative? Do you have a thing yet? Do you have a product? Is this a kind of a net new greenfield product or idea that you're working on? Cool, let's get some ideas around it. Is it summative? Does your product already exist and you just need to learn where the pockets, the pain points are so that you can focus on those areas? Fortunately, Fortunately, we have a couple usability workshops, 4 o'clock today, this very day, and then 10 on Friday. Right. So if you're interested in usability testing, we have a couple workshops focusing just on those. Right. So the takeaway for this, really the best part about these techniques is that anyone in your organization can accomplish them. We're talking about surveys, interviews, which is a conversation, and a usability test where you're just really observing how someone interacts with your product. Mm-hmm. So again, the best part is that anybody can do these things. And they provide transparency to the organization and identify target users and ideal demographics. All of these things are extremely beneficial. But one thing that might get the attention is the ROI piece, right? Are you testing? Are you learning from your users before you produce a thing? We're probably all familiar with some kind of representation like this that says, essentially, the longer you wait to test or redesign, the more money it costs. And nobody wants to be the thing that drives more money to be cost, right? In fact, we want to save that money. So early and frequently is how we look at usability testing in the ideal. So now that you've done the testing and the interviewing, you want to build something, right? So I'm going to pass this right on back to Matt, and he's going to talk about design.
All right. So design can be a pretty loaded term. What I want to do is demystify it a little bit so that so that we don't have to think that it's the daily designer that does design, that anybody can do design in some respect. And remember that also, as Donald Norman said, it's not just design isn't UX, right? They're not synonymous. Design is just one part of this, and trying to really implement the user perspectives into something real-like is how I look at it. So the first part of this is just make it easy. Don't make it hard. Make ideas tangible and to appropriate fidelity, right? So the first example here is going to be making something that's just way too high a fidelity. This is done. This is our home page, right? This is way too high fidelity. So for a designer or developer, they're going to say, I already created it. It's done. There's nothing to change, right? And it's too costly to change. It's already programmed. It's already done. But for a stakeholder is, I don't know design, but I want to critique this, and I want room to critique this, but they can't at this stage, right? It's already done. So it creates this too high a fidelity, very costly thing to create, to make a decision on. The reverse is that something can be really too low fidelity. So if it's too low, then you can't really go through and talk about this in a visual way. It just doesn't hold any meaning, and it can frustrate everybody in many ways. So the designer, the first one, which is, what is this a drawing of, right? And for the stakeholder, they're like, well, man, it's the best feature ever. Can't you see it, right? So this doesn't hold a meaning or something that you can go forward and use to create a design that you can test, that you can go forward with. So that's kind of the spectrum of those two. You can kind of find something in the middle, right? Something that's not costly and that you can use. And so this is really the point of this whole part of this, and introducing it to your organization. Maybe you're not a designer. You're sitting here and thinking, well, I can't illustrate. I can't design. We've seen this many times in workshops where the pen gets handed over to the designer, and they're the person all of a sudden running the workshop, right? So what I want to really hammer home here is that don't let the person holding the pen hold all the power. So as someone introducing UX and design to your organization, make it easy for everybody to be able to contribute and collaborate. So one way is to use common components and patterns. So things that are already out there in your environment, your design system, use those first because everybody already understands them, right? So you can move those things around to create a new solution. Another way is that I really like is called paper framing. So kind of wireframing, but with physical paper that you can move around. You don't have to erase the whole design and start over and redraw it. You don't have to do little arrows to like little sections. You can just really move these things around very quickly and create new designs and new ways of looking at things. And the last part here is really go for the quantity. So don't try to just get the best idea. Get lots of ideas, right? You need to know what the bad ideas are to get the good ideas, right? So just try to get all of those out there in your design activities. And so this is just one example, but this is an activity where you have nothing written on these pieces of paper. It's a bunch of strips of paper out in the middle of a table. They're all different sizes of components that might exist on a page, like a search bar, or maybe there's a sidebar, whatever the layouts and perspectives of components and elements you're looking at. Put those out on a paper, or on a table, everybody grabs one, they can write something on it, they can magnet to it, to the whiteboard, you can move it around, you can just really get a layout pretty quickly with these different features or different parts of the page. So the other part of design is you had to be there, right? So you get these big workshops and you have all this really great stuff, and you have the end of it is just you had to be there to actually know what happened. And so really important to create artifacts. So paper framing, photos good, you can share that. But yeah, create artifacts whenever possible. So typically designers can abstract from low fidelity, but C-level members need a little bit higher fidelity. So remember that when you're starting to aggregate whatever happened in that design session to share with someone, you need to kind of bring it up a little bit so you can share it with your whole organization. Same vein, diagrams are great for engineers. Flow diagrams are great for engineers, but designs are great for marketing and people that need to see something a little higher up. So make sure like you're kind of looking at that gamut of who might be looking at the the designs in your organization. This last one's really important. There's all sorts of great tools out there for wireframing. There's all sorts of great tools for sketching things. Just do it. Don't worry about the latest tech. Just go with what's really comfortable for you and what's comfortable for anybody picking up your file. Because really, if they can pick it up and they can do something with it, that's the collaborative buy-in that you're looking for from your organization. If you lock it into like some program that's brand new and nobody knows, guess what? You're going to be the only one pushing the elements around. So make sure you keep it wide open. And that's a little bit of homework for you guys as far as just listing the file formats that can be friendly for your whole environment. So if it's Word, if it's PowerPoint, if it's, I don't know, anything, right? Balsamic, Paint. If it's a really good one. Absolutely, yeah. So if anybody can pick it up and collaborate with it, that's good to keep the design going forward. So with that, that's the wide overview of introducing your UX to your organization. We wanted to open this up to QA, which could be anything. So, yeah. I'm a user experience architect for primarily Esri.com and marketing side of things.
And I'm a user experience architect on the software side for desktop.
So yeah, so for our organization, it really was probably like 2-3 years ago. There wasn't much of this UX, actual UX roles in the company. So we've had to do this on our own with even Esri to try to introduce more and more UX into things. And so one of the reasons we're doing this is because it's something we're passionate about. In the format, in Carl's, in the software world, that's more the format. For me, I have a lot of cross-functional stakeholders. So sometimes it's that clear as far as a product owner. Sometimes it's just product marketing, or sometimes it's the CMO, so it has different structures for stuff I do. Yeah.
How does your audience size kind of change your UX process? Whether it's, you personally know the persona in your user story, or, thousands of users in the base. How does that change things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what's really important there is representation. Like, do you have a representational understanding of who your users are? The amount of your audience really doesn't matter. If you can abstract that understanding of what are those archetypes, doesn't matter if the size of your audience really would be my response. So I think it's about really putting energy into building a representational understanding. Like if you have a persona or 2 or 3 or 4. Yeah, that's the important part, right?
Back here.
We have a great product in our still there is this struggle between the developer and the user himself. So whenever we go to the developer, it's hard for him to follow up with the user. And the user wants something easy for him to do it in an easier way. So every time we say that we publish a new release or a new version of our product, the end user is always complaining about the use of that application itself. We go back to the developer himself. He says, no, he can do it. He will use this and that. That's it. We fall into the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think so right there you have a really classic kind of relationship that's, like the developer is saying one thing, maybe, other stakeholders are saying different things. The user, yet again, is having different experiences and has different, right? And so for the first part of your comment, I think there's never going to be a shortage of user feedback, right? There's always going to be feedback from users. And what we cannot do is throw a lasso around all of that feedback and say, all right, I guess that's our next release right there. We're going to just focus on this stuff because there's a lot of other moving pieces there, right? There's the planned release for your business goals themselves that don't necessarily reflect or are built on that user feedback, right? So there's that. So we're never going to get away from that. We can only triage those needs and those asks and really address the thing that at the time seems the most, of the highest value or the highest payoff, the biggest thing. Now, the second part of your comment around the pushback from developers, I think that's kind of what we mean when we say, like, don't design like a programmer. Like, your programmers or developers might be guilty of saying, well, so of course there's a way to do that. It's like this and this and this. Can't you see? But that might not be the experience that is, that might be, do you remember the triangle we put up? That it started with like mechanical ability and then it moved into it's usable and then finally it's enjoyable, right? That's living at that bottom level. That's, your story to your organization is that we're cool with that bottom level. That it mechanically works. It's that bare minimum, right? That right there. It's functional. So shut up, right? I mean, I think that kind of speaks for itself, right? Yeah. It's like, if we're happy here, cool. But I mean, we might run into some issues where we actually develop a mistake. I know developers never make mistakes. I know that. But let's say that something happens, right? And then we have to go back and actually invest some cycles into repairing that. I think it can be a little short-sighted to assume that just because something functions means that it's going to be a successful thing or a usable thing, right? And so I think it's really chipping away and urging that conversation right there with those people that are at the core of some of this work. And I remember saying, do you remember the maturity model that we put up at the beginning with 0 all the way? Don Norman has his own maturity model, and he's, according to him, to get to that top expert level, that's 40 years. He literally says 40 years of influence on an organization will get you to that top level, according to Donald Norman, right? So there's a lot of thinking around how long that might take to urge that developer to see life in a different way. Right? Sure.
Who starts the cycle? The developer or the user?
Which cycle?
The cycle of the creation of that application.
It's a constantly rotating thing where all stakeholders are influencing. It's like a spirograph where you put paint on it. Does people remember a spirograph? Or am I combining two different toys? Everyone has influence kind of constantly, right? And it's the balance of that conversation that is the tricky, right? Yeah.
It just costs more to create the product at the end of the day. How do those conversations go for you guys? Maybe more so saying this is getting really expensive here, but we're hitting with our product. How does that work?
I think it's...
Yeah. It can seem that way if it's all at once. But he's going to pull up.
Where'd it go?
So yeah, it can seem that way if it's all at once. The idea is that you're building that base, right? Like, you're getting more of the user into the functionality and those things at the bottom. And so once you have those kind of understandings and you have something more concrete to build off of, those other things can happen. You can't just do it all at once, right? So that would be my short answer, is that it's a cycle. It takes a bit. It's not like you're just going to make something awesome and fun and creative up front, right? It's got to be functional. It's got to have those things in place to be able to put in front of users and get those things that are actually the really top of what's going to be delightful or what they're looking for. That's what you're building up to.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of responses to that. I think, first of all, what costs more, right? And I'll just pull this graphic up, right? Which costs more? Investing in design early and then having something that you've vetted because you have some kind of understanding around who your users are, what aspects of your product you need to focus on, what features are important, and investing that time to kind of like develop out those feature sets. Mm-hmm. Does that cost more, or does realizing that you have an unfortunately designed experience and no one buys it, or people shun it, or it's not accessible at all, and it turns out accessibility matters, and so people aren't consuming anything, which costs more, right? So there's that. That'll be my answer.
Does that help? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Would you guys have a comment on an organisation where you've got quite different levels in your little pyramid or staircase? You have some small groups quite articulating these environments and
Yeah.
others that should be, but
Yeah.
aren't, and quite separate parts of the organisation.
Yeah. Yep. What happens when that happens? You should start setting up some meetings.
Yeah.
because if it exists in one pocket of your organization, there's the possibility for that to transfer over to other areas of the organization. And I think it's never fun, and it's not easy, because it's like allocating resources to get a thing going, regardless of what that thing is, takes time.
Yeah.
And so I do though think that if there's pockets of your organization that are approaching these concepts more successfully than you think you are, or your team is, or your pocket is, then get together, share that knowledge, become part of a community of advocates within your organization to share information, because you know what, this stuff is tricky and nobody has all the answers, and we're all kind of figuring it all out at the same time, right? And so I think building that community and having identifying those resources is probably my first go-to. I would just start sending emails and start getting those conversations going. How are you doing this? What are you doing? How do you invest in this?
Yeah.
When do you do these things?
Yeah, and for us, we're part of that group that's doing a lot of it. And so just if you're the group that actually is doing it quite well, just being available and just opening up your calendar. If somebody yeah, exactly. Okay. But yeah, once then you adopt it, or you become an expert on this, or that it becomes working for you, it's nice to be able to just be open to it. Keep your calendar open, be around for whoever might pop up on your schedule, and just accept the meeting and learn something new about another part of the organization you don't know about yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it seems like a lot of research and testing stuff can be impacting the timeline. Devs want to push something out, they want to build something. What if we don't have time to invest in all kinds of research, and we don't have the money to build a lab and do all this other testing? What is there things that we can do to at least get started in that? Does it take a lot of time? Does it,
40 years.
yeah.
So no. Yeah, that's great. I think it's important to remember that we really tried to emphasize that you can do this. You don't have to have a design background to do this. You don't have to have a design background to talk to people and to ask them how they feel about a thing, right? And I think that's the core of this. So it's, do you have resources to build a lab with eye tracking and other cool stuff? Probably, maybe not. Yeah. Do you have the ability to put together a survey and shoot it out to some people to get some feedback about a thing? I'd be surprised if you didn't.
Yeah.
Right? Can you reach out to those people, set up an opportunity to talk to them, put a test together for those people? You probably can do that, right? So short of the lab, what can you do? Short of having a design and UX team, what can you do? Part of that is those brainstorming activities and building out that community of people who will brainstorm with you, right? And organize around those concepts, those card sorts or affinity diagrams, or those kind of fun stuff Matt was talking about are great ways to get everybody's ideas on the table. And that's a shared experience, and I think people value that.
That's really key. Yeah, the shared knowledge of who that user is, what you're trying to solve for, that gives you a shorthand that when you come back together and something's not working, you can quickly jump on and keep that cycle going. I think that there's also really easy free tracking tools out there. I mean, it's maybe more for stuff that's public and on spaces like that, but a lot of tracking tools are very, very free and public at this point. So that's an easy way to see if people are jumping off at a point, if they're completing something, that type of thing too. So with live stuff, prototyping and creating a bunch of ideas and testing them A, B, C, D, E, F, that's pretty expensive, but with the thing that you have that's already out there, it's pretty easy to get feedback from. So
cool. We good? Yeah.
I guess maybe a lot of organizations may not have the resources to set a dedicated resource for this concept. I'm assuming that since y'all are into this so much, you've studied this a little bit, or maybe seen what some other organizations are doing. Have you seen anybody having success with actually tasking developers to do some of this tasks up front in a more organized manner, or is there just so much pushback on that
I think it would, like, first of all, you want to be the friend. You want to be an ally to your developers, right?
Yeah.
Saying, hey, check it out. I think we need more UX. Do this. That might be rough, right? Like, be an ally to your developers and kind of like some of the brainstorming activities, the advocacy that you can personally do, I think is important. And I think it's being that ally, like being that advocate for these processes, not just for users. Advocating for users, of course, great thing. That's what this is all about. But advocating for process as well is something that you can do. And by doing, you help show your organization how you can put a simple conversation together, can erupt into a lot of ideation and a lot of potential solution, right? And so I wouldn't task your developer to be in charge of that stuff, right? Unless they're interested or you can get them involved. Part of what Matt was talking about is organizing and aligning around a thing is, who do you talk to about a thing? Who are your advocates within the organization that you can reach out to? And then who are the people who you think you might get resistance from? There's going to be people from all categories in those lists, right? Yeah. But I think it's kind of galvanizing around a concept and helping with that work as opposed to like delegating to someone is probably going to be important.
So it sounds like maybe you're thinking that this is a role for someone maybe from the side of developers to do that.
I know. Anybody can do this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think developers get a bad rap where
Yeah.
they're like not interested in usability or user experience, and I think that's not true.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised if that was.
I think it's more an organization to give that developer the time to do it.
Yeah.
That's maybe more of it. If they're not coding, sometimes it's seen that they're not being productive, and so it's more of an organizational buy-in to say, 10% of your time, we should probably have you, shift your thinking and try to do some of this user experience. So, yeah.
Sometimes getting the right feedback is difficult. Do you have any advice for if you're soliciting feedback from potential users or actually
Yeah.
what are some good questions to ask and what are some bad questions to ask?
As far as just screening, kind of getting the right people.
Sure that the feedback you're getting is the right sort of feedback. I imagine
Yeah.
you like this design.
Avoid yes or no questions.
Yeah.
Or binary questions.
Yeah, definitely a clear objectives of what you're trying to get from the study helps shape that. If you have that in mind, then you can start to ask the questions that steer you towards getting that kind of feedback. But yeah, yes, no questions, probably not. But definitely making sure the user's comfortable or whoever's being tested is comfortable, that you're testing the design, you're not testing them, because people can get outside of what their normal task would be if they feel like they're being tested, right? Then it's am I right, rather than like, this is what I would do normally. So those kind of things help to get like a good feedback from the user and not have them in a too contrived of a test situation. If you have the time, trying to keep it open-ended and try to keep it to what they would usually do, have them tell a story about what they would usually do. That's really good feedback to even see if you're on the right track. Sometimes if you pigeonhole them too quickly, then you're not going to get what they would actually do when they sit down at their desk. So there's good background kind of stuff that you want to get outside of just like, does this work? And that's why interviews are great. I mean, surveys are awesome. It's great quantitative kind of stuff, but once you get into an interview, you can really kind of do those pivots and kind of learn more about the user within the interview, which is awesome. So, yeah.
All right, Matt, you're killing it. You got a lot of good stuff. This is great, but
we got 5 minutes, right?
don't be sad. Well, does it go all the way to 2?
I think
We
so.
had to release, okay.
Oh, do we?
I don't know.
What do we got to do?
Check it out. This has been really fun and enjoyable. If nobody else has any questions, feel free to approach us or Sherry in the back. She wants to talk to you too.
That's Sherry.
We work together. So don't forget that this is really just this kind of kicks off the storyline, right? There's usability, accessibility, collaborative brainstorming, all of which we've talked about during this. So you can really plug into some of those topics in a real way after this as well. There's some other really great sessions happening this week, as you're well aware of. So hit it up, learn some more about UX, approach us with any questions, and make the world a better place. Care about users. Center those users, right? Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.